Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Of course, tonight is the night of the Isra and the Mi'raj. Happy holidays to all of you, all of us, inshallah. And may we use some of the portion of this night to remember this great blessing that was given to our beloved sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Continuing with the text, we are in section 7, his state regarding the necessary actions of daily life. قال المصنف رحمه الله ونفعنا بعلومه في الدارين آمين. Qadi Iyad, he writes, may we benefit from his knowledge in this world and in the next, inshallah, Ameen. The things necessary for daily life can be of three kinds. There is the kind which is excellent when it is in little quantity. There is the kind which is excellent, which is large quantity. And there's the kind which varies according to the situation. So the things that we just naturally do throughout the day, throughout the week, etc., sometimes those things that we do a little of are good, those things that we do a lot of are good, and then other times it depends on the situation. So he's going to go through these natural human functions that we have and show us how the Prophet ﷺ had the best of each category. The sort of thing agreed to be more perfect and praiseworthy when it is little in quantity, in any situation, both according to custom and to the Sharia, consists of such things as food and drink. Both the Arabs and the men of wisdom continue to praise making do with little of them, and censure having too much of them, because indulging in a lot of food and drink indicates greed, avarice, avidity, and being dominated by appetite. That results in harm in this world and the next. It brings about physical illness, coarseness in the self, and dullness in the brain. A little of it indicates contentment and self-control. Restraint of the appetite produces health, clear thought, and a sharp mind. Right? So overeating and over drinking is something that we naturally say is not good. The same applies to excess sleep. It is an indication of feebleness and weakness, a lack of intelligence and astuteness. This produces laziness, the habit of failure, frittering away one's life in what is not useful, hardness of the heart, and neglect and death of the heart. Here he means the spiritual heart. The proof of this is well known, observed, and transmitted in what previous communities and wise men of the past have said, particularly in the poems of the Arabs and their stories. It is also to be found in the sound hadiths and the traditions of the Salaf and those who came after them, which do not need to be quoted. We will not mention them in full here, giving only a summary, since the knowledge they contain is quite well known. So here, in Qadi Iyad, he's talking about much broader than just the Quran and the Sunnah. And he's saying all people, all wise people, all wise traditions will say the same thing, that these are aspects, oversleeping, overeating, overdrinking are not good things, and they lead to an unhealthy life. Regarding both of the above mentioned things, the Prophet ﷺ was the most abstemious of men, a fact which can be gleaned from his well-known biography. He commanded and encouraged people to make do with little of them, connecting them together. So specifically, food, drink, and sleep. There are many hadith traditions, he'll give us a few of them. There are many hadith traditions that talk about having less of them is being good. As a matter of fact, when it comes to the science of tasawwuf, one of the things that we talk about for the person who is beginning their journey to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is to lessen from their food, from their drink, and from their sleep, and also from their speech, over excessive talking. Al-Miqdam ibn Ma'di Karb said that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, the son of Adam, this is a very important hadith, the son of Adam does not fill any container worse than their belly. Sufficient for the son of Adam are some morsels of food to keep their back straight. Meaning, you know how when you're really, really hungry and you're kind of like, you're like putting your hands on your stomach because of the hunger pains. The Prophet ﷺ is saying that the amount of food that we should be consuming is enough, just enough so we don't have to do that, so we can walk upright. For example, when we break our fast in the month of Ramadan, we've been fasting all day, and then Maghrib time comes in, and we eat a few bites of food at that moment of the adhan, and then we break to pray. The Prophet ﷺ is saying, those few bites that we eat, that's enough. We don't need to go back after the prayer and then eat more. However, he continues the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ continues, he says, if there must be more, then it is a third for the food. So a third of your stomach, you should fill it with food. A third for the liquid, the drink, and a third for your breath, so you can breathe. Because the result of a lot of food and drink is a lot of sleep. So this is one of the hadith that I heard and continue to hear frequently from my teachers about the importance of just eating a little bit, but we unfortunately we overeat. We overeat to the point that sometimes we can't breathe, or like, oh God, I can't even get up and pray. After you eat, for example, if we continue with the example of the month of Ramadan. So this was the advice of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Sufyan al-Thawri said, by having only a little food, one is able to stay awake at night. Right? The more food that we eat, the more food that we consume, the physical body is going to be more engaged with digesting it. Sometimes when people eat a big meal, they get sleepy after the meal, like especially people that have a big lunch. It's very hard for them to be productive for like the rest of the day, etc. And of course, for people that want to implement things like this, you have to do it slowly. It's not like you read this and then you go out and do it. That's not going to work. You have to be gradual. One of the Salaf said, do not eat a lot so that you drink a lot, then sleep a lot, and lose a lot. It is related that the Prophet ﷺ said, the kind of food which I prefer is that which many hands are in it, meaning that foods that have been prepared by many people. So the Prophet ﷺ, this is another aspect, he liked to eat in a communal way. And the traditional like sunnah way of eating is that there would just be a big dish in the middle and that we all sit around that same dish and we eat from that same dish, which is a very communal thing. It invites us all to be together. It is, Sayyidah Aisha alayhi salam said that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam said that the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam never filled his stomach completely. When he was with his family, he did not ask them for food nor desire it. If they fed it to him, he ate. He accepted whatever they served him, and he drank whatever they gave him to drink. This is not contradicted by the hadith of Barira when the Prophet ﷺ said, didn't I see a pot with meat in it? It is possible that the Prophet ﷺ asked in this instance since he realized that they thought it was not lawful for him, and he wanted to make the sunnah clear. Seeing that they did not offer him any of it, even though he knew that they did not prefer themselves to him, he ascertained whether what he thought was true and made the matter clear for them by saying, it is a sadaqah for her and a gift for us. Because the Prophet ﷺ and the family of the Prophet ﷺ do not take from the zakat, they take from gifts. So this story has to do with that. One of Sayyidina Luqman's ﷺ's aphorisms was, my son, with the intestines are full, reflections sleep, wisdom is dumb, limbs falter in worship. Sahnun, who is a famous collector of Imam Malik's positions, he's a great figure in the Maliki madhab, said, knowledge is not fitting for someone who eats until he is full. So he's talking here about students of sacred knowledge, people that spend much of their life with the Sharia sciences. In a sound hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, "As for myself, I do not eat sitting in a settled posture." Sitting in a settled posture is sitting firmly settled or reclining in order to eat, meaning that you sit down so you can eat a lot. For instance, cross-legged or in some other such comfortable manner of sitting. Someone who sits in this manner demands foods and seeks a lot of it. When the Prophet ﷺ sat down to eat, he sat squatting as someone ready to get up. So the Prophet ﷺ would sit on one foot, and his right knee would be I can't do that on the camera. It would be standing up. That's how he would sit, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he would eat. Meaning that he's just squatting just to have a couple of bites, and he's going to move on. He said, "I am a slave. I eat as slaves eat, and I sit as a slave sits." The import of this hadith is not merely reclining on one side, as some people say. It was the same with his sleep, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He slept but little. Sound traditions testify to that. Furthermore, the Prophet ﷺ said, "My eyes sleep, but my heart does not sleep." So the Prophet ﷺ, he used to sleep on his right side. He used to sleep just a few hours. But despite that, he also said that my eyes sleep. So if you looked at him when he was sleeping, ﷺ, you would say he was sleeping. But he says, "My heart does not sleep." So he was continually conscious, continually aware, which is one of the special traits given to the Prophet ﷺ. The thing about sleep is it also requires training. It's not like you can read this and then go out and say, "Okay, I'm only going to sleep a few hours." You won't be able to make it. But it's about training. And it starts with sleeping early and then waking up early. And then getting used, your body being used that I can be up at 4 or 5 in the morning, and it's okay. It's not too, that's the time that I need to get up. Once you do that slowly, naturally you will start to want to sleep early, so on and so forth. The Prophet ﷺ, he used to sleep on his right side in order to be able to sleep less heavily, because sleeping on the left side is easier for the heart and the internal organs since they incline to the left side. Sleeping on the left side leads to deep, long sleep. When someone sleeps on the right side, their heart is suspended and agitated, and the sleeper tends to wake up quickly and is not overpowered by deep sleep. Okay, so that section was largely about food, drink, and sleep, or it was about food, drink, and sleep. And these are things that we would naturally agree need to be done in moderation, and not to be overdone, and that the overdoing of them leads to an unhealthy life. I mean, you never hear about a leader or a successful person, successful in any aspect of life. They're sleeping like 12 hours a day. I mean, you don't hear about that, or gorging themselves with food all the time. It's not happening. Because it slows you down. In our modern English, we would say it slows us down. And that's what the Prophet ﷺ is saying. If you overdo all of this stuff, it's going to slow you down. You become lethargic, you become slow in your mind, etc. Okay, section 8, marriage and things concerned with it. The second category of necessities of daily life is praised and boasted of when it is abundant, and includes such things as marriage and rank. So in our tradition, there is no contradiction between living a good life, a godly life, and being married. So this idea of asceticism, this idea of monasticy, so that's what I was trying to say, a monastic life in which people do not marry. We do not consider marriage to be a hindrance into our spiritual development. It's the exact opposite. It's an aid to our spiritual development, which is one of the differences between the Islamic tradition and other world religions, because in other world religions, or pre-Islamic religions, let's say, the opposite was considered true. In other words, for me to live the best life, there has to be this renouncing even of something like marriage. Not all of the pre-Islamic religions, but many. The necessity of, and by the way, what that does is one of the negative effects of that is it drives a wedge between those who live the monastic life and what we call like the laymen, the lay people. So it's like the lay person is like less of that religion or less pious. And it's almost like there are two religions within the religion. And the monastic people over time are not able to relate to the lay person's life. Because when you're married and you have kids and you experience that, it's completely different. When you're single and you have nothing to worry about and you have no responsibility, it's easy for you to pontificate and give advice and things like that. But when you're dealing with kids and the kids that grow up and your spouse and all of that, that's real. That's a real test. Anyway, the necessity for marriage is agreed upon in the Sharia and in custom. It is a proof of perfection and sound masculinity from the point of view of the man, of course. It has always been customary to boast and to praise of it a lot of it. And as far as the Sharia is concerned, it is a transmitted sunnah. In other words, it's normal that when you meet people, how many kids do you have? So, oh, mashallah, I have 3 kids and, 2 grandkids. I mean, people talk about that as if like a positive thing. You're not ashamed to talk about how many children you have. It's something that we see as a positive thing. Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu said the best of this community is the one with the most wives, indicating the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I'll talk about polygamy in a moment, but let's just get through a couple of the lines. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, marry and procreate. I want to increase communities by you. He forbade celibacy. This is because marriage brings with it restraint of the appetites and lowering of the eye or lowering of the gaze, as the Prophet ﷺ pointed out. He said, whoever has the capacity should marry. It lowers the eyes and protects the private parts. The capacity here is financial capacity, emotional capacity together. So it's not just that I can afford to get married, but that I'm mature enough to get married. And that's, we have a lot of young people in our community, a lot of single people in our community. So this section is going to drop for you these key principles of what to think about when it comes to marriage. And for those of us who are married, it's an opportunity for us to recommit ourselves to those principles. So marriage requires for you to be ready and to have the capacity for it financially, because you're increasing your financial burden, and you also have to be emotionally ready for it. You have to be emotionally ready for companionship. So you can't get married and you're selfish. It's not going to work, because marriage by default breaks that selfishness. And a lot of the problems that I see, and I think maybe hopefully Imam Rifai would also concur, is that one of the main problems of marriage is that one or both of the parties are simply selfish. It really comes down to they're selfish, and they're approaching marriage with this idea of the me. But when you get married, it's us, not me, it's us. Okay. For this reason, the scholars do not consider it something, meaning marriage, that detracts from the virtue of abstinence. So having a spouse, being sexually active with your spouse, having children with your spouse, this is not against living a life of zuhd, living a life of less. For us, it's not. It's 100% compatible. That's what he's saying. Sahla Tusri radiallahu anhu said women were loved by the Messenger of Allah, so how could he abstain from them? Ibn Uyayna said something to the same effect. Right? This is one of the Prophet's things. He loved women, and he had several wives, as we will come to see. And when he loved women, it means that he was soft with women, and he was kind to women, and he respected women, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this idea that the woman is this nasty creature and we shove her off to the side, if we find that in our Islamic societies, that's wrong. That's un-Islamic. That's not what we were taught or are taught by the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. The most ascetic of the companions had a lot of wives and slave girls and had much sexual intercourse with them. More than one of them disliked the idea of meeting Allah unmarried. Again, the idea is that this is this is a good thing. It's a thing that protects you. It does not affect your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, of course, a lot of these references talk about polygamous marriage, and polygamous marriage is something that, while we know it is permissible in Islam, I mean, for the man to marry more than one wife, it is something that has many, many conditions to it, and ultimately is something that really needs to be done out of necessity, not just something that I just feel like getting married to a second woman, and I do that because it comes with not only does it come with extra responsibilities, but it also comes with extra burden, because you're burdening your first wife, you're harming your first wife, essentially, so on and so forth. So a lot of the idea, or a lot of the issues with polygamous marriage is that it's also cultural. There are some cultures in which it's more natural, and there are other cultures where it's not natural. Like in my culture, it's not natural. It's not a normal thing. It's a scandalous thing. And probably many of you would feel the same way. But there are some Muslim cultures in which it's still problematic, but not like that, not at the level of it being scandalous. Okay, it might be asked, how can it be that marriage has so many virtues when Allah Ta'ala praised Yahya, the son of Zakaria, for being chaste? How could Allah praise him for not doing something considered to be a virtue? Furthermore, Christ alayhi salam remained celibate. If things are as you claim, would not he have not been married? The answer to this is, it is clear that Allah Ta'ala did praise Yahya for being chaste. It was not, as someone has said, that he was timid or without masculinity. Astute commentators and critical scholars reject this assertion, saying that it would imply an imperfection and a fault, and that this is not befitting for one of the prophets. It means that he was protected from wrong actions, that is, it was as if he were kept from them. Some say that he was kept from all of his bodily appetites, and some say that he did not have any desire for women. This idea about masculinity that Qadi Iyad is talking about is obviously he's talking about from the perspective of the man, but you could equally make the same argument for the woman, is that this is part of being a man, is having a wife and doing the things that married couples do. And part of being a woman is having a husband and doing the things that married couples do. So we adopt that that's part of our gender, and that's part of our natural disposition. And we say that unapologetically. That's what he's saying. If you're a man, then you incline to women, you have relations with women in a halal way, so on and so forth, and vice versa for a woman. So when it comes to Yahya, he's saying it's not that he did not incline, because if you say that, then that would somehow be a blemish to his masculinity. And part of being a man is that that's a natural thing. That's what he's saying. But that Allah Ta'ala protected him from that. It is clear from this that the lack, and I'm not making any comments about, toxic masculinity and that stuff. I mean, that's something else completely. We're just trying to understand our faith. It is clear that from this, that the lack of the ability to marry is an imperfection. Virtue lies in its taking place. Therefore, the absence of it can only be through the exercise of a counter virtue, either striving, as in the case of Isa alayhi salam, or by having sufficiency with Allah, as Yahya did, since marriage frequently distracts from Allah and brings a person down to this world. Someone able to marry and carry out the obligations incurred by marriage without being distracted from his Lord has a lofty degree, such as the degree of our Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Having many wives did not distract him from his worshipping his Lord. Indeed, it increased him in worship, in that he protected his wives, gave them their rights, earned for them, and guided them. And he clearly stated that such things were not part of the portion of his earthly life, but that they are part of the portion of the earthly life of others. Right? So he's opened homes, he's protected these women, he's brought them under his care, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's what it's about. The Prophet ﷺ said, but the text of the hadith is hubbibi ilayya. He made me love in this world of yours women and scent. So Allah Ta'ala gave the Prophet ﷺ natural disposition that he loves women and beautiful smells. And the coolness of my eyes is in the prayer. وَجُعِلَتْ قُرَّةَ عَيْنِي فِي الصَّلَاةِ. It's a very famous hadith. So the Prophet ﷺ, the most pleasure that he got from this world was when he was in prayer, communicating with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that he indicated that his love for women and scent, beautiful smells, which are worldly things for other people, whereas his occupation with them was not for his worldly life, but rather for the life of the next world, because of the other worldly benefits of marriage already mentions, and his desire to come out to the angels wearing a beautiful smell. Scent also encourages intercourse, assists it, and stimulates it. If your spouse or if you smell nasty, then that's going to have the opposite effect, right? But when you beautify yourself for your spouse, that facilitates intimacy. The Prophet ﷺ loved these two qualities for the sake of others, right? So the thing about smelling good, the ulama say it is a form of charity for other people, because oftentimes you can't smell yourself. Like maybe when you come out of a shower or you put some scent on, you can smell it, but then because your body gets used to it, you don't smell it. So the reason you beautify yourself or you want to smell good is so when you meet other people, you don't smell nasty. So smelling good is a sadaqah. It's a form of charity for other people so that they are not attacked and accosted by your body odor. His true love, particular to him, lay in witnessing the jabarut of his Lord and intimate conversation with him, which is what we do. We communicate through Allah, to Allah through prayer. That is why he made a distinction between the two loves in the text of the hadith, and separated the two conditions by saying, and the delight of my eyes is in the prayer. Yahya and Isa alayhim salam were on the same level regarding the trial of women. However, there is an extra virtue in satisfying women's needs. The Prophet ﷺ was amongst those who have been given the ability to do so, and he was given it in abundance. This is why he was allowed a greater number of wives than anyone else. So one of the Prophet's ﷺ's unique qualities, his khasa'is, is he married and he had more than 4 wives at the same time. It is related from Anas that the Prophet ﷺ used to visit his wives in 1 hour of the day or night, and there were 11 of them, meaning to engage in intercourse, which is, that's not normal. A normal man can't do that. So the Prophet said this shows his physical strength and vitality. Anas radiallahu anhu said, we used to say that the Prophet has been given the power of 30 men. So his physical strength was at that level. This is one of his special qualities. Something similar was related from Abu Rafi'a. Tawus said the Prophet was given the power of 40 men in intercourse. A similar statement came from Safwan ibn Sulaym. Salama, the female client of the Prophet ﷺ, said the Prophet ﷺ would go around in the night to his 9 wives and then purify himself from each of them before going to the next. He said this is better and pure. So just as an aside, it's a sunnah that after intercourse, after engaging in intercourse, you enter into a state of janaba, so you have to make the ghusl. But if a couple wants to re-engage in intercourse, it's a sunnah to at least make wudu, if not a full ghusl, before the second intercourse. That's what that statement's about. Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam said, I went around in the night to 100 or 99 women, so he had that capacity as well. Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu said there was the semen of 100 men in the loins of Sulaiman, and he had 300 wives and 300 slave girls. And Naqash and others related that he had 700 wives and 300 slave girls. While the Prophet Dawood alayhi salam was being ascetic and eating from the work of his own hands, he had 99 wives, and he completed the 100 by marrying Uriya. Allah Ta'ala mentions this in his mighty book when he says, this brother of ours has 99 wives. Of course, I've already commented about slavery in the past, so there's no need to talk about that. This is, Dawood and Sulaiman alayhi salam, we're talking about thousands and thousands of years ago. In the hadith of Anas, the Prophet ﷺ said, I have been preferred over people in four things: generosity, courage, much intercourse, and great power. Meaning that he had the physical ability to engage in this activity with his wives in a way that really nobody else can, because he's been aided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this act. So the idea behind these texts is to show us that he, as a man, this is part of your function as a man. That you normally, a man will seek out companionship and vice versa for a woman. Part of that relationship is the sexual intercourse component. And if you do that, and again, a lot of the people that I talk to, a lot of the couples that have problems that I talk to, believe it or not, while selfishness is one problem, a close runner-up is sexual frustration. This is not necessarily the venue to talk about that, but many relationships suffer from sexual frustration of all sorts of different kinds, whether it be issues of pornography, whether it be issues of not understanding how to re-engage intimately with your spouse, so on and so forth. And many marriages, unfortunately, crumble because of that. So, and this is, I have seen hundreds of couples and relationships falter because of this issue. So don't think that what we're reading is some sort of, it's off-putting or doesn't make any sense. As for rank, it is normally praised by intelligent men or intelligent people. There is esteem in the hearts according to rank. When Allah Ta'ala described Isa alayhi salam, he said he is noble in this world and the next. However, it is also the cause of much misfortune and is harmful for some people in relationship to the next world. That is why people have censored it and praised its opposite. The Sharia also praises obscurity and censures exaltedness in the earth. The Prophet ﷺ possessed modesty, position in the hearts of men, and their esteem both before his prophethood, during the Jahiliyyah, and afterward. They then rejected him, injured his companions, and tried to harm him secretly. But whenever he encountered them face to face, they showed him respect and gave him what he needed. The traditions about this are well known, and we will give some of them. So the Prophet ﷺ was a Sayyid. He was a leader, a nobleman of his people. He was from Quraysh. He was from Bani Hashim, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And these were the direct descendants of Sayyidina Ismail alayhi salam, the family that was responsible for the upkeep of the Kaaba, for providing food and Zamzam water to the pilgrims, so on and so forth. So this is something that he was born into this. He was natural. He had that type of nobility. Anyone who did not see the Prophet ﷺ before would become perplexed and terrified when they saw him. This is related by Qayla. When he saw the Prophet ﷺ, she trembled with terror, and he said, "Poor girl, you must be calm." Right? So when you were in his presence, ﷺ, there was a natural haiba, there was a natural awe that people had, because he was a noble person. He was of noble birth, but real nobility is how you carry yourself, how you dress, how you speak, how you interact with people. In the hadith of Abu Mas'ud, it tells of a man who stood before the Prophet ﷺ and trembled, and he said to him, "Relax, I am not a king." As for his inestimable worth by reason of his being a prophet, the honor of his position by being a messenger, his exalted rank by being chosen by Allah, and his honor in this world, it is as great as it possibly could be. And in the next world, he will be the master of the children of Adam. The implication to be drawn from this section forms the basis of the entire chapter. Okay, we'll do the next section, inshallah, and then we'll get questions. Section 9, things connected to money and goods, like physical things. The third category of necessities whose praiseworthy and excellences vary according to the situation includes things like having a lot of wealth. Generally, someone with wealth is esteemed by the common people because they believe that he can get what he needs, and with it, and his goals can be attained by it. It is not a virtue in itself. When someone has money and spends it on meeting his own needs and the needs of those who come to him with the intention of helping them, using it correctly, it brings him nobility, praise, excellence, and a good station in the hearts of the people. It is a virtue for him in the eyes of the people of this world. So we praise money in society because we assume that the person who has money has all of their needs met. In other words, we believe, whether we acknowledge it to ourselves or not, that money buys happiness. So it's not money itself that is what we praise, it's what that money can purchase that is praised, which obviously is not true, but as humans and our weakness, that's how we perceive things. But if I use the wealth that I've been given to help others, then we would praise that more accurately. So one of the things that we'll learn is that the Prophet ﷺ had access to vast amounts of wealth, yet he did not spend that wealth on himself. So we do not think of the Prophet ﷺ as being a rich person. But when we read this, or what we're about to read, you will see he could have been a very wealthy person individually, but rather he used that wealth to build his community. Right? So this is a message for us, for our ICCP community. Right? This is the sunnah that we want to follow. If he uses it in the paths of piety and spends it in the way of charity, intending Allah in the next world, then it is virtue in the eyes of everyone and in every instance. When the one who has wealth, withholds it and does not use it properly and is avid to amass it, then even if there is a lot of it, it is as if it did not exist. Right? The miserly rich person, right? Scrooge McDuck. Remember Scrooge McDuck, from the cartoon? Scrooge McDuck had this big vault of gold, and every day he would go in and he would dive in the gold. But he never spent it. So what's the point of having all that gold? And there are people that are like that. There are people that amass things and they don't use it. So it's basically as if you don't have it because you haven't used it. It is an imperfection in the one who has it. It does not take him to safe ground, but throws him into the ditch of the vice of miserliness and meanness. Praise of wealth and its virtue, when it is considered a virtue, does not lie in the wealth itself. It is elevated through its connection to something else, and it's being used in the proper way. If the one who amasses wealth does not use it properly, he is not really wealthy and not rich in the true sense of the word. None of the men of intellect praise him. He is always poor and does not obtain any of his objectives, since he possesses the wealth to realize them but does not have real control over it. He is like a treasurer in charge of someone else's property who has no property himself. It is as if he had nothing. The one who spends it is really rich and wealthy. He has obtained the benefits of money even if none of the wealth remains in his possession. So real wealth is using that money, spending it. That's the real wealth because you've spent it. You've done something with it. Examine the biography of our Prophet ﷺ and his character in dealing with wealth. You will find that he was given the treasures of the earth and the keys to the lands. Right? Listen to this, because this is not how we normally think of the Prophet ﷺ. The booty, spoils of war, which had not been lawful for the prophets before him, were allowed to him. During his lifetime, he conquered the Hijaz, Yemen, and all of the Arabian Peninsula, as well as the areas bordering Syria and Iraq. So all of those lands, all of that, the spoils of war, all of that tribute came to the Prophet ﷺ. He was brought a fifth of the booty, al-khums, that's one of the categories of the spoils of war, al-khums, that goes to the state and is distributed to the Prophet ﷺ and his family. He was also given the jizya tax, the zakat tax, of which earlier kings had only obtained a fraction. He was given gifts by several foreign kings. He did not keep any of this for himself, nor withhold a single dirham of it. He spent it all in its proper channels, enriched others with it, and strengthened the Muslims by it. So the Prophet ﷺ used all of that wealth. Even though he had access to it, he used it all. And in the process, he made many people and many tribes wealthy because he gave in a, beyond a generous way. The Prophet ﷺ said, I do not feel easy if any gold dinar remains with me overnight, except for a dinar which I have set aside to pay a debt. A dinar is a gold coin, a dirham is a silver coin. Right? These are the currencies of Islam. And of course, these go back to the Romans and to the Greeks, the drachma and dinari. So these are non-Arabic words, but these are the currency of Islam. So when you see the word dinar, that means gold coin. Dirham means silver coin in the language of the Sharia. Sometimes he was given dinars and divided them, and perhaps 6 would be left over. Then he would give them to some of his wives. He would not sleep until he divided them out. Then he would say, now I can rest. When he died, his armor was in pawn to feed his family. So we know that when the Prophet ﷺ died, he had lent or used as leverage or as collateral one of his armor with a Jewish neighbor whom he had purchased food from. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. As far as his maintenance, clothes, and dwelling were concerned, he was content with the demands of necessity and abstained from anything more than that. He used to wear whatever he had available. Generally, he would wear a cloak, a coarse garment, or a thick outer garment. So basically a thawb, like what in the language of the Shaykh, qamis, so a long tunic. And then if it was cold, he would wear a outer garment, a jubba, a jacket over that. He would distribute outer garments made of brocade and embroidered with gold to those who were there and send them to people who were not there. That is because with the people of Allah, pride in dress and adornment is not one of the qualities of nobility and honor. It is one of the qualities of women. Okay, so the Prophet ﷺ was always given these beautiful fabrics, so he would distribute them. But you see what Qadi Iyad is saying? He's saying because you want to beautify your women. You want to adorn your women. But when it comes to the men, I'm happy on the simple side, simple type of clothing. The garments which were most praised are those which are clean and medium quality. Wearing clothes of this kind does not detract from manliness and does not lead to aggrandizement in other people's eyes. The Sharia censures that. The most frequent cause of boasting for people is the vaunting of many clothes and much wealth. Right? It's like what we see on social media. People wearing their wealth. The sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ was the opposite of that. Why? Because that's not where real nobility is. So you can afford to buy an expensive this and expensive that, wear an expensive this. That doesn't mean anything. That doesn't make you noble. Doesn't make you great at all. The same applies to pride in sumptuous dwelling place, a spacious house or having a lot of goods, servants, and animals. Anyone who has some land and harvests it and then gives the produce away out of asceticism and detachment obtains the virtue of their property and has the right to boast of this quality, if boasting can indeed ever be said to be a virtue. There is firm praise for turning away from wealth, making do with little when it's no longer there, and spending it properly. Wallahu ta'ala a'la wa a'lam wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Okay. Hopefully some food for thought for all of us. Tonight's class discussed a lot of, I think, very relatable issues. I thought for men gold was not allowed. Comment please about gold brocade outer garments. Well, that's why he gave them away. So he was given, foreign dignitaries would give the Prophet ﷺ these things as gifts, but he would give them away. As silk as well. So there's a hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ was given a silk fabric and he gave it to Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. And then Sayyidina Umar said, I thought we're not supposed to wear silk. And he said, I didn't give it to you to wear. I give it to you to use. You can sell it. So Umar radiallahu anhu gave it to a brother of his who was not a Muslim at the time. It's a very famous hadith. It's in Bukhari and elsewhere. So that's, you can give it away. So if I'm given, gifts, maybe somebody gives me, I don't know, a gold watch. Okay, it doesn't mean I have to wear it, but I can give it to my wife or sell it, so on and so forth. So he would give it away. Oh Lord, there's a long one. 1 second. I need to make the chat box bigger so I can read this. Okay. Would you recommend less sleep for people who are sick? For example, some say more sleep is needed during that time, or will they make the illness worse? No, you're sick. So in that case, you have to sleep because it's a form of medicine. We're just talking about the normal state. No, when you're sick, you have to rest. So I would, the opposite. Forcing yourself not to sleep when you're sick could be haram, because then you're making yourself more sick. How would you recommend young men and women deal with not being married and having inappropriate thoughts? And having inappropriate thoughts is normal. It's natural. It's the problem, or the issue is acting on those thoughts. Right? So sometimes thoughts can come and go, but the idea is that we do not want to act on those thoughts. It's the act that we are taken to account for by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not the thought. Is it okay for men to be protective of their wives? Protective of their wives, but don't suffocate your wife, because your wife is not a piece of property. She's a human being that has her own dignity. So I want to protect my wife, but I also want to see my wife flourish. So people, they think protection means you put your wife in a cabinet, and then when you want her, you open the cabinet. Your wife is not an object. She's a human being. So yes, be protective of your wife, but you have to trust your wife, and you have to trust Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you have to make sure that you have an environment in which your wife can thrive. That's what we should be thinking about. We don't live in a world where, for the most part, where I'm worried that my wife is going to step out of the house and then she's going to get robbed by a highway robber. It can happen. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but we live in a secure place, alhamdulillah. So the idea of a man has to protect his wife, you also have to put that notion in context. There was a time in which I had to do that. I couldn't let my wife go out because it's not safe. So my form of protecting her is maybe accompanying her or something like that. Now you need to protect your wife by making sure that she has access to the things that she needs to thrive, and to thrive spiritually, emotionally, so on and so forth. I've read that a prayer with doubt does not count. Does the doubt include doubt about how many rakats was prayed? No, you get from your prayer that which you are present with. That's the hadith, not about doubt. So that's something different. If you doubt the numbers of rakats in the prayer, then you default to the lower number, and then you pray based on that. If you end up praying an extra rakah, that's okay. Is it okay for Muslims to become therapists and give advice to people? Only if they become qualified, but don't be the person who doesn't know anything and give out advice. There's a lot of those people. So if you are in a position in which you are going to teach, if you're in a position in which you are going to advise, then you really need to know your stuff really, really well, because then people are going to take what you say and act on that. So you need to be certain that you are qualified. Can I pray on a silk prayer rug? Yeah, that's okay. Is it permissible for women to wear perfume in public where there are non-mahram men? It's how the woman wears perfume. So we've talked about this before. If a woman wears perfume from the point of view that, or in a way that it is excessive and draws attention to her, that's what the hadith prohibits. But if a woman wears the perfume in a way so she doesn't smell bad, that's acceptable. Based on your experience as a religious leader in the Muslim community, do you have any potential explanation for why many young Muslims are drawn to controversial personalities such as Andrew Tate for learning how to be masculine rather than learning from the prophetic example? Because it's what bleeds leads. It's just how journalism's always worked. And look, we're reading this like 600-page book. It's going to take us a year and a half. It's very boring. I mean, even look, now there are half the people that are in the class that were, 2-3 weeks ago. It's natural. It's a slow burn. It takes dedication. It takes consistency. But if I make a little video, or if I have a TikTok video and I say the most outrageous, ludicrous thing, then it gets shared because it's like a dose of dopamine. It's like if I have a shot of espresso, or if I drink a Coke, I get that rush of sugar, that rush of caffeine. And that's just human nature. So most Muslims don't have the patience to learn their deen. It's as simple as that. But this deen is very sophisticated. At times there are complex answers, complex issues. You need to spend the time to learn them. You're not going to learn it through TikTok. It's just not going to happen. So the reason people get I don't know anything about Andrew Tate, by the way, at all. Nor do I care to know. And that's another thing, that I don't have to have an opinion about everything. I remember I had a professor at Princeton. His name was Jeffrey Stout, who was a very committed atheist, but yet he was in the religion department, which I always found very strange. I remember one time we were in class. He used to have a course at Princeton about religion and film, which I was always regretful that it was never offered when I was there, or I didn't have a chance to take it. But anyway, he was telling me about this. We were in class. He was talking about that course that he was preparing for, and he said somebody at a neighboring university in the East Coast had asked him to give a talk, or to participate in a talk about Mel Gibson's movie. I think it was Christ, or The Passion of Christ. And he looked to us and he said, I mean, how can I talk and lecture about this movie? I've only seen it once. And I remember I said, what do you mean? He said, well, I mean, for me to have an informed opinion and to talk intelligently about that movie from the perspective of a professor of religion, I would have to see the movie at least 4, 5, 6 times. And I really, really respected that. That was a big learning lesson for me. I was like, oh, there are a lot of Muslims that are not like that. Muslims have an opinion about anything, even if they don't know anything about it. So I don't have an opinion about Andrew Tate because I don't know anything about him. I haven't spent time consuming his content, nor do I see myself ever doing that. So I'm just giving a general comment about that. We have to have the patience to learn so that we can really, really learn. If a woman wears a hijab and doesn't cover all her skin, and then slowly starts wearing longer clothing, does her wearing the hijab at the beginning count, since she wasn't wearing it properly yet? Don't ask questions like that. Allah is merciful, inshallah. We don't want to think about inches and centimeters, and let's not think like that. Allah is merciful and forgiving. Just a logistical question: how can we arrange for the nikah services with ICCP? You can talk to Sister Zamruda. Talk to me, could talk to Imam Rafai, but Sister Zamruda is usually the one that organizes, only because we have to schedule things because sometimes something else is happening at the masjid. So we just want to make sure that, one time we had a nikah and we had to displace all the poor kids from Sunday school. I remember Sister Zamruda and I did this, and then the couple came. And they're like, oh yeah, we're not really doing the nikah today. We just wanted to come and visit the mosque. And Sister Zamruda and I looked at each other like, we just moved all the kids into the basement. So we need to know, speak to, I take back what I said, speak to Sister Zamruda. She will handle the logistics because, as I said, we just need to make sure that it doesn't conflict with something else. That being said, this is also a reminder of the importance of the activity building. We ended the class on the being charitable. So this is one of the reasons why we want to get this project going, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make it easy for us and facilitate it, because we do need other spaces to do the things that we do. Alhamdulillah. Any other questions that people have? والحمد لله رب العالمين، وصلى اللهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. اللهم صل
ما شاء الله.
أفضل صلاة على أسعد مخلوقاتك سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم عدد معلوماتك ومداد كلماتك، كلما ذكرك الذاكرون وغفل عن ذكره الغافلون.